in that way, we're usually able to help people save lots and lots of money and keep them from sending it to the IRS using their own rule book. We are not Social Security experts. However, we do a lot of work with Social Security to maximize your Social Security cash flow when you do retire, because there are literally thousands of ways to file and to potentially change your Social Security after you file. But you have to do it within a certain amount of time, but they don't tell you that. And do you guys have a lot of experience with Social Security? Yeah, so if you, well, insert eye roll here. So, and if you've ever gone in to speak with them, usually one of the first things they'll tell you is they can't tell you anything legally. It makes you wonder why you're there in the first place. Anyway, I digress. Well, we're not Social Security experts. However, we have done some advanced study in Social Security and how it works. And like I said, one of our main precepts is to maximize your Social Security income when you actually get there. In terms of planning, or if you're already there, how can we help you to do it while you're there? And a lot of that has to do with keeping your money from the IRS. We'll get more into that. If there are any questions along the way and you want to stop me, feel free. This is going to be more like a conversational thing. I may actually take this microphone off if it gets to be too loud for everybody. So just give me feedback and let me know how we're doing. It's nice to see a familiar face or two, by the way. I do. Not to point anybody out or anything, but okay, so what do? We do asset allocation, and we grow your money. We grow it and we preserve it so that you can pass it on for later and as tax-free as humanly possible by the time you get there. We do Social Security and pension optimization, which means keeping your money from the IRS and maximizing your cash flow from these places. A lot of times this can be challenging with a pension. And then we also do some tax planning, but it's more for the purposes of net income, keeping your money from the IRS. Again, if I say that too much, just hold up a finger. But that's the goal here, is for you to keep your money, because you're the one that's earned it, right? Not the IRS. By the way, does anybody in here have a business partner besides you, Angela? Anybody? Oh, is there anybody that can tell you how much to pay them and change that any given year with or without notice to you? And change the terms of your agreement with or without your consent? Nobody like that? Well, the IRS is actually your business partner. Whether we realize it or not, they are our business partner. And that is typically the single largest expense that every American has from birth to death, is taxes. In fact, as far as I know, we're one of the two countries that no matter where you go in the world to make money, there are exclusions, but you have to pay the US IRS in addition to whatever taxes in the country that you're working, right? And the other one, does anybody know what the other one is? Somalia. I'll just let you stew on that one. Yeah, you were going to say that. Okay, so here's what we're doing here. By the end of this, and hopefully you'll all still be awake, and I don't say that because I consider myself boring. I say that because this is just some seriously dry content. But we're going to do our absolute best to get through it. And the goal here is to make sure that you walk away knowing more than when you came in. And the truth is that we'll probably know more from talking to you guys than we did when we came in. And that's our goal here. Okay, we're going to talk about tax rate risk, retirement distribution planning, which is critical, maximizing Social Security, protecting against market loss, and then we'll have a summary about it, and then we'll take questions. But as I said, we'll take questions along the way if you want to, okay? I'm not one to read slides, so like I said, it's probably just going to be more like a long conversation, and I hope that's okay with you guys. So let's get right into it. Number one, tax rate risk. In years from now, do you think taxes are going to be higher, lower, or the same? Who says lower? There's no wrong answer, by the way. Who says the same? Who says higher? Okay, so that passed, congressional measure. Okay, no, the reality is that you're probably all right, and here are some of the reasons why. We briefly spoke about pensions. It used to be you get a pension, you had your Social Security, and then whatever you could squirrel away and invest and not lose in the market, that would be the icing on your cake, right? And that's how you retire. Now, right around in the 70s, I think 74, 70, produced the 401k, right? And that began to replace pensions. And so now that's kind of flipped up on its head. The pensions are at the bottom, even if you get one. If you get one, you're lucky enough to get one, it causes you tax implications later on, and we'll talk more about that. But it's pensions on the bottom, Social Security, which has to be maximized. If it's not, then you're walking away from, the average American walks away from probably $250,000 to $300,000 from the time they first file to the time they die because of the way they file and because of the ins and outs and the rules that they don't know. So it's very important to have guidance on this. And not just from us, but from other people. And we know some other people we can connect you with if you're looking for that sort of thing. And then, of course, the basis of your retirement now is going to be what you do from the time you start working to the time you retire, right? So it's basically all on us now, which is kind of a good thing, but also if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have any guidance or education, it can be to your detriment and to the IRS's, what's the word I'm looking for? Benefit, that's it. So we want to avoid that. So in retirement, there is a myth, I'll say, that we're going to be in a lower tax bracket. And for some of you who have retired, you know this is a myth. And for some people, that actually ends up that way. But a lot of the reason is because when we retire, a lot of our deductions go away. Does anybody know what they are? Just shout them out. Our deductions that we get when we retire. If you can itemize your deductions anymore, right? Home loans, yeah, interest on your mortgage. What else? So not the costs themselves, but if you can itemize, you can take those off on your Schedule A. Kids, yep. Not property taxes, but the interest on your mortgage, yes. Charity, because you give more time to charity when you retire typically than you do money because you're not making as much money, right? And there's another one out there. What is it? Kids, charity, contributions, right? To your 401k. You're not working, so you can't contribute to them anymore, right? So it's possible that you'll be in a higher tax bracket when you retire. Now, like I said, some people already know this, but it's a myth that's worth busting. I'll say it that way and getting ahead of. Okay, so this is one of my favorite charts. It shows the top marginal tax rates in the US for the HIPS since 1913 when the IRS was established. So actually, let me go back. Can anybody tell me what the highest marginal tax rate in the US has been in the history of the country? 38 is about what the highest is now, actually. It's 37. What's the highest? Keep going. It's up there. Like you're 94. And that was in like 1945 and 46, I think. 94. As a matter of fact, so this for the highest earn, any dollar over 94, or any dollar over $200,000, you would pay 94 cents to the IRS, right? So in Ronald Reagan's autobiography, he made a joke, sort of a joke, that he only used to make 2 movies a year because they would pay him $100,000 a movie, and he didn't want to make anything over $200,000 because he'd have to send it to the IRS, right? And the other 6%, I guess, would go to Nancy. I don't know. He didn't really say that, but I'm just guessing. So, and this was obviously the end of World War II, right? Okay. Now this is the end of World War I. World War II, the end of World War III. Oh, did I say that out loud? No, never. I'm just kidding. But that is an actual risk. It's called a geopolitical risk for those who haven't watched the news in the last year or so. It's a very real risk, and hopefully it won't come to pass. But the reason I point that out is because these 2 world wars caused the tax rates to jump up. Now, it's not just taxes by themselves. It's the way they structure it. So we'll get into a little bit more of that too. So now if you look over here, this chart is 2017, but it hasn't changed since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is set to be renewed. Who knows? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll stay another 4 years. Maybe Maybe not. Anyway, my point is the highest marginal tax rate now is 37%. So compared to 94%, taxes are on sale. That's the purpose of looking at this graph. And it's also a concept worth remembering because if, like you all said, and you're probably right, taxes they pretty much have to go up. Now, the factors causing taxes to go up, the list is long. Go back. Okay, so if you look at the U.S. debt clock, has anybody ever been to that site? usdebtclock.org. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can wrangle this technology a little bit, enough to a point where we can explore some of this. Okay. Does anybody have ADD? Can you see it? Am I in your way? How about that? Okay. This website is out there on the interwebs for all to see. And if you ever have trouble sleeping, don't look at it. But in the morning, if you want to wake up, no, don't look at it. Forget about it. So don't ever look at it. This is a running total of the U.S. national debt. Right now, we're at $36.6 trillion, give or take, right? Because the interest rates have been jacked up, and for all of us in this room, we can all remember when interest rates were way higher than they are right now, yes? Right, so they're not really that high, but compared to 5 years ago, they're astronomical, right? Now, but here's the issue with that, and it's a big issue. This number right here, and there are a couple slides in here we'll gloss over when we get to it, but this number right here, see, interest on debt, that's the capitalizing interest on this debt, the running total. So this is the interest on our national debt based on the current federal funds rate, right? And as some people have delightfully portrayed on YouTube, it has surpassed our national defense budget, which I honestly never thought would happen. And that's huge. And it's huge because this is money that we have to spend just because we owe it, right? That's a debt. Do we have a lot of debt averse people in the room? Yes, no? Like you don't like to have a mortgage, you don't want to have car loans, that sort of thing. Usually there's a mix. Some people don't care, Anyway, the reason this is so troublesome is because this gets stacked on top of this number every day, every year, however often it compounds. But it's compounding. So it gets added on. And then that interest has to be paid the following year. As a matter of fact, the US has $9 trillion that we need to refinance in loans in 2025. 2026 and on, I think it's like $2 trillion for a few years. But this year, we have to refinance $9 trillion. Think about that. So that'll give you an indication as to what we're going to have to do with interest rates. But we'll see how all that plays out. Let's see. They've added some stuff to this since the last time we did this, and there's the Doge clock, and whatever you think about that, that's up to you. But it's just interesting to look at, I think. The other things on here: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Just over 1.5 trillion, 1.5 trillion there. So the reason I wanted to pull this up is because it's basically to make the case that taxes have to go up, right? And you guys already know that. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but this is part of the reason that is most likely going to happen. Now, this guy, his name is David Walker, and he was basically the super accountant for the US under Clinton and Bush. Okay, where'd you go, Dave? Anyway, he wrote an op-ed to CNN, testified before Congress in 2008, wrote a book, quit his job, and he started touring the country basically to say, listen, guys, you got to get your fiscal house in order or we're going to be insolvent. And the crossover point on that graph is 2025. And so in 2008 and 2010, he looked at all the numbers and accurately predicted that we would not be able to cover our unfunded and our funded liabilities by 2025. And it turns out he's spot on, I guess, because there's a whole lot of stuff going on behind the scenes now that I kind of see it as maybe a panic. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, Dave said, we're going to have to double taxes, cut our expenses in half, or a combination of the two. And you don't have to do it all right now. It just has to be done by the time we get to 2025, or we won't be solvent. Okay, that didn't happen. Taxes got cut, expenses went up. So now we're kind of in a pickle, to be honest with you. It's not a pickle that we can't work our way through, because that's what we do, right? We kick the can down the road and then we make things work while we buy the time. So one of the things that we look at is, okay, these are our tax rates now, right? One of the things that we look at is, has this happened before? And there's been talk, and actually bills in Congress for the last 7 or 8 years, to take our 7-tier tax system and make it into a 3-tier tax system. So is it possible? Yeah, it was that way in the 60s. And these are not outside the realm of possibility. The reason that we put these numbers in here like this is A, because it's happened before, but 2, because this is double this, double this, double this. So it's possible or likely that tax rates will double in the future. We don't know when, right? So where does that put us as the people who pay taxes in this country? There's about 80 million of us or so. Puts us in a bigger pickle. These are the tax brackets. The reason we put these on here, is because we'll actually send this slide presentation to anybody who wants it. And like I said, if you have insomnia or anything like that, this is great. This will definitely help. No, but the reason we do this is because these are what we use when we help people determine how much money they want to do Roth conversions with. We'll get into more of that later on. But if you want to convert some of your tax deferred money into Roth money, these are what we use to determine how much you want to do. Because we usually will maximize a tax bracket. And again, we'll send this out to you. Okay, so national debt, it was $5.7 trillion 25 years ago. And our interest payments were $223 billion, which seemed like a lot back then. Today, as of today, is $36.6 trillion, and the interest is just over $1 trillion. 3 years ago, it was only $30.6 trillion, and the interest payment was only $441 billion. The interest payments have gone up 2.5 times, and the debt has gone up another 15%, 16% in 3 years. So if you're standing on a railroad track, right, and you see a train coming, just like the coyote and the roadrunner, right? Do you stand there, or do you just kind of step off and let the train go by, right? This is a runaway train, right? So the answer is taxes are going to go up, and you're all right. Anybody who raised their hand, you're right. So, okay, so how do we get you set up and set yourselves up as you move along through your working life, and then even after that, so that you optimize your cash flow when you retire? That is the question that retirement distribution planning answers. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about 3 basic types of retirement accounts per the IRS rules. We're going to talk about how to maximize that cash flow. And has anybody ever asked this question or been asked this question? Should I do an IRA or should I do a Roth IRA? Like, do your kids and your grandkids ask you that? Anybody else at work? No? Yeah. Have you ever asked that question? You ever wondered? Yeah, because it's worth asking. Okay, so what's a true tax advantaged investment and what's not, right? The answer here is that a true tax advantaged investment does not generate a 1099, doesn't cost taxation of Social Security, doesn't have capital gains tax, right? So that's a preview of a couple of slides we can gloss over now. So it doesn't cause capital gains tax, doesn't generate a 1099, it's not taxable income, and it doesn't cause your Social Security to be taxed. They call that a phantom tax or a ninja tax, because you do these things and you don't know that it's going to trigger Social Security tax, right? Okay, when should you convert from IRA to Roth IRA? These are the Roth conversions we were talking about. It's very important. And how you do it is even more important. And how do these distributions from your tax deferred accounts, which are your IRAs and your 401ks, how do they affect your Social Security? Because they can trigger it to be taxed. There's a pretty insidious game going on there. We'll get more into when we get there. And then how can we reduce these, right? So this is what we're going to talk about. Retirement distribution planning is accumulating the right amount of money in the right buckets. We call them buckets. And the right types of accounts so that when you pull the money out, you get as much as possible and you give as little as possible to the IRS all the way around. And that's the right answer, right? Because who wants to leave the IRS a tip? Nobody ever raises their hand. Like, you don't think they need a tip? Well, and we get, what's your name? Leslie says we get really good service from the IRS. So, why not? Okay, so here are the three types of investment accounts. We got a taxable account, taxable bucket. We got tax deferred account, tax deferred accounts, and we have tax free, right? Now, we're not going to get too far into the weeds on a lot of this, but we will go over a few for each type. Okay, so the best way to protect yourself from taxes is to accumulate and move the right amount of money into the right buckets. So let's talk about the taxable bucket first. This bucket is where you put money and you make interest, presumably, unless it's in a savings account. Did I say that out loud? Oh. No, but like your high yield savings accounts and your CDs and money markets, like maybe getting 5% or something like that. Every year they send a love letter to the IRS where you get great service. And this love letter says, hey, Leslie made $12,000 on her investment in her savings account this year. Of course, she'd have to have $1 million in there to do that. But it's called the 1099. And this is where they track your taxable income or taxable interest, right? So that's why they call it a taxable account. So the things that we want to use these for, they're usually pretty liquid. You can just put your money in, take it out. Unless it's CD, then it's locked up for a little while. And they generally make good emergency funds. There's actually a better way to do that, and we'll talk about that later in a little bit. But the issue with these guys is that they're taxable at whatever your highest marginal tax rate is, and two, if you're making 0.5% interest or even 5, and inflation is 2, 3, 25, whatever it actually is, then you're potentially losing buying power by having it there. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have money in one of these, because it's a good place to have emergency fund money and go money that you need right now, right? And we all have a need for that somewhere along the way between now and when we die. It's just going to happen, right? So, oh wow, we just blazed through that one. All right, so what is the ideal balance that you want to have in this bucket? You didn't know there's going to be a quiz, did you? This is a class, man. No. So, anyone? Throw it out there. Yes, sir. I'll say 3 to 6, just because. I'll show you where to put another 3 that's actually better on you. Depends on how much your expenses are. But yeah, 3 to 6 months living expenses in this bucket, and no more. Like, if you put more in here, you're just getting taxed unnecessarily. Now, there are some people, and we don't fault them for this, but they want to see $300,000 in their savings account. There's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that you're losing money to inflation and getting taxed on it, and there are better ways to do it. But some people have to look at it because they want them, because it's security, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that there are better ways to do it. So, tax deferred. Okay, this bucket here, the tax deferred bucket. You may be wondering, why is there a green frog in here? We'll come back to him in a minute. So the tax deferred bucket is your 401k, your IRAs, your 403bs, your SEPs, anything that you don't pay taxes on the way in, but you pay taxes on everything on the way out. The gains that you make in there are not taxed while they're sitting in there. They're tax deferred for later, right? Now, and also we have some fixed index annuities that do this too. So let's say you throw $100,000 in an annuity that's an IRA. It also grew on there tax-free, and you won't pay taxes on anything until it comes out. There are also ways to use that for not what they call non-qualified money. So the difference between non-qualified money and qualified money is tax designation, right? So if you have $100,000 in your savings account and you don't like what's going on in the market and you want to make a little bit more and you want guaranteed income later, you throw it into an annuity, and then later, and all of it builds up as far as it does, and then you don't get taxed on it until you start taking it out. Then you get taxed on just the interest. So it's kind of a hybrid tax-deferred taxable account. Now, what do we want to do this for? Well, here's why. If your income is $100,000 and you're over the age of 50, you can contribute $8,000 into an IRA, right? When you do that, your taxable income now becomes $92,000 because you get to take a deduction off of your taxable income. Most of you probably already know that. That's the benefit but for anybody who doesn't, that's the main benefit of doing this. And if you don't do this, and you should be, then you're leaving money on the table, and you might as well just write a check to the IRS because that's what's happening. If you can take advantage of this and it makes sense to do so, you need to. Because this and then the money coming out is probably the single most efficient tax strategy account there is, as long as it makes sense, right? And that means up to a certain amount, right? So when anything that comes out is taxed as ordinary income, which means all those tax brackets we saw on the side, they fill up from the bottom to the top. Or the graduated tax system. So as they fill up, your highest marginal tax bracket fills up with a certain amount of income. This adds to that, and it's taxed at that rate, whatever that highest marginal tax rate is, right? Does everybody follow that? Yes. Yes.
So that's earned income, not
That is earned income. What's your name? Sharon. It's nice. I'm Tony. It's nice to meet you. Yeah, like Sharon said, that's earned income. So from a job or a business even, right? Now with a business, there are other things you can do to make this even better, and we can get more into that after, or if you guys want to talk later. So they're taxed as ordinary income. Now, they can and may cause your Social Security to be taxed, but we're going to look at ways to get around that. And if you leave it sit there till you're 59 and a half, and for some jobs, some companies, you can start taking money out earlier. There are some exceptions, not very many though. You got to wait till you're 59 and a half to start taking money out. But everything you take, and if you don't, then they'll penalize you. You got to pay them 10% just for nothing. There's your tip. And and depending on when you were born, you have to start taking money out after the age of 73 or at the age of 73. Now, these are called required minimum distributions, RMDs for short. And they recently changed the age that you had to be in order for this to start happening. So basically, it's the IRS saying this. We've let this grow tax deferred for decades, and now we want our money, right? So they have a schedule, and we'll take a look at it, that you have to start taking this certain amount out of all of your tax deferred accounts.